Hello, everybody. Welcome back to History Speaks. Today we will be concluding the Arab rule in Africa. I have two chapters here. I'm going to read chapter 10, and then chapter 11 is basically kind of a wrap up. It's only like 2.5 pages or something like that. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Chapter 10: Morocco, the heritage of a great Arab king. Arab and Muslim, contemporary Morocco owes its double character to ancient and modern history alike. Moroccan nationalism was, from the very beginning, in close contact with the Arabs of the Levant. It was also Muslim in its origins. It sprang mainly from the Berber Dahir of 16th of May 1930, which removed the Berber tribes from the jurisdiction of Islamic Orthodox laws, acknowledged the competence of the tribal customary courts, and placed most of the tribes themselves under French criminal law. The nationalist reaction to this unprecedented measure was prompt. The exiled nationalists, together with Arabs from the Levant, launched a violent campaign against what they called a colonialist attempt to destroy Islam. Nationalism accordingly appeared not as an anti-colonialist movement alone, but also as a kind of defensive action to preserve what was believed to be Orthodox Islam. The opposition to the Berber Dahir spread throughout the country. It allowed scores of young men from bourgeois Arab families to distinguish themselves. Among them was Muhammad Alal el-Fassi. A pan-Arab and militant Muslim, Fassi constituted for a long time an efficient link between Moroccan nationalism and the Arabs of the East. He was one of the numerous nationalists who sprang up at that moment, dreaming of an independent Morocco enrolled as part of the Great Maghreb and looking towards the Arab East. Towards the end of the Second World War, new horizons opened up before the Arabs of the Middle East and Africa. News from Beirut, Damascus, and Cairo came to the court at Rabat, where the Sultan Muhammad was closely watching the Arab world events. The Lebanon and Syria were stirring, and the Arab nationalists of the two countries were loudly calling for the fulfillment of the independence which had been solemnly proclaimed to them in 1941. News from the Levant had profound repercussions on the whole of the Middle East and North Africa, and it was under these conditions of nationalist agitation in the Arab Middle East in December 1943 that one of the early friends of Alal el-Fassi, Ahmed Balafré, launched a Moroccan nationalist party, Hizb al-Istiqlal, or Independence Party, which was destined to play a major role in achieving independence for the country. The formation of the Arab League on 10th of May 1945 stirred great enthusiasm among the Moroccan nationalists, and the monarch, Sidi Mohammed, shared their feelings. He expressed publicly to the masses and privately to his intimate friends his belief that the proper place for Morocco was at the heart of the Arab and Muslim world. In February 1945, 3 months before the official foundation of the League, he publicly voiced the hopes that talk of the League was raised among many of his countrymen. In June 1946, Alal el-Fassi was freed after 9 years of exile in Gabon and returned in triumph to Morocco, with his personal standing in the Arab world at its peak. A year later, he was received in Cairo, where he declared that the day was not far distant when Morocco would take her place in the Arab League. Staying some time in Cairo, he entered into close relations with the League organization. Within Morocco itself, a period of gathering tension ensued, and in August 1953, the Sultan was deposed and exiled to Madagascar. Alal el-Fassi and the other Moroccan nationalists had already been using the radio station in Cairo to transmit inflammatory calls to Morocco. For a year, since July 1952, there had been a new regime in Egypt, and it had encouraged Fassi and the North African refugees to use Cairo as a base for propaganda and nationalist agitation. The news of the Sultan's dethronement exploded throughout the Arab world, where, just as in Morocco, Sidi Mohammed had grown into an almost legendary figure, a hero, and now even a martyr. Arab newspapers and radios redoubled their activity against French North African policy, and poured scorn on the new Moroccan king, Moulay bin Arafa, whom they called the puppet Quisling. Egyptian broadcasting stations, well supplied with fiery speeches by Alal el-Fassi and his political friends, broadcast daily incitements to revolt, and when Muhammad V regained his throne in 1955, the event was hailed as a victory by the Arab nationalists throughout the Middle East. Morocco did not gain her independence until the 2nd of March 1956, 18 days earlier than Tunisia, her fellow North African state. She did not join the Arab League until 2 years later, in 1958. She hesitated even more before linking herself further with the Arab East, and signed the Arab Mutual Defense Treaty only in June 1961. All the while, she seemed reluctant to cast in her lot with the rest of the Arab world. Sidi Muhammad himself started his independent reign with a policy of prudence. Prudence towards the Arab League, from which he held aloof for more than 2 years, anxious to avoid dragging his country into inter-Arab disputes. Above all, prudence towards Cairo, whose politics were at that time violently anti-Western and favorable to the East. And Morocco had other major preoccupations besides this: internal reforms, the demands of Maghreban solidarity, and the Algerian War, to which was soon to be added the thorny question of Mauritania. 1960 was Africa's year, and Morocco joined in the general African turmoil. It seems strange to see this country, ruled by an absolute monarchy and preserving feudal values, joining with the African militants like the United Arab Republic, Ghana, Guinea, and Mali to form the Casablanca Bloc. In January 1961, indeed, the Moroccan town of Casablanca was chosen as the center for this new association of radical African states. And Morocco agreed to enter into close political relations with these remote countries. An African Consultative Assembly, with political, economic, and cultural committees, was established, and an African military high command was organized. The architect of this, in many ways, bold and surprising policy was the 50-year-old monarch, father of a large family, an Arab and a Muslim, who thought that his country had several missions to accomplish by virtue of its being an Arab, Muslim, Maghreban, and African state. In the eyes of Moroccans, Muhammad V was not only the architect of his country's independence, he was also the man who placed it within the framework of Africa and the Arab world. Indeed, far from showing any opposition, the king, after a short period of hesitation, vigorously encouraged relations with Africa and the Arab world, a policy which in many respects is still pursued by Morocco. Similarly, further afield, Morocco has moved progressively towards the policy of positive neutralism. She has recognized the Peking government and concluded economic and trade agreements with the Soviet Union and other communist countries. Throughout the Arab world, Muhammad V was considered a fervent Arab nationalist, and his death was keenly felt far beyond the borders of Morocco. The tributes paid to him in most Arab countries were considerable. A Cairo periodical wrote, quote, "Muhammad V, with King Norodom Sihanouk of Cambodia, was the only reigning and ruling sovereign to realize the full value of positive neutralism. Sovereigns of little countries who have the courage to make a difficult choice and bring about radical changes in their national policies always have been and still are rare, especially since they have been pursued by forces which have been powerful and still are." End quote. No other Arab figure has gained such praise from Nasser, who declared on Muhammad V's death, quote, "The Arab nation has lost one of its heroes, one of those men of great sincerity, who have long spent their energies for its unity and dignity. History will recall with pride and gratitude his whole-hearted national struggle for the liberty and independence of Morocco." End quote. To understand the foreign policy of a country, it is necessary to appreciate its internal situation. This is particularly true of Morocco, which, ever since independence, has had to face vast political, economic, and social problems. The nationalist movement, which had in general retained its unity in pursuit of the country's independence, gradually divided. There ensued a conflict quite common in the Arab world. A radical section of the nationalist movement sought to achieve deep reforms after the attainment of independence. Since it was so difficult to reconcile the divergent social and political forces which had been freed at the end of the French protectorate, the palace strove to preserve some form of balance between them. But this balance soon appeared precarious. The coalition government which took control of independent Morocco enjoyed only a short existence. In November 1956, and again in December 1958, it was completely reshaped. The powerful Istiqlal Party was, in its turn, weakened in 1959 by the breakaway of its large radical wing, strongly tinged with republicanism, which established itself on 6th of December 1959 as an independent organization, the Union Nationale des Forces Populaires, or UNFP. The emergence of this party marked an important new stage in Moroccan politics, since it reflected the desire of wide sections of the population to share more directly in the political life of the nation. The king had already taken into account that desire by allowing, in November 1958, the formation of a government under Abdallah Ibrahim, supported by the left wing of the Istiqlal Party and by the powerful trade unions of the Union Marocaine de Travail, or UMT. A few years after independence, therefore, the Morocco of Muhammad V presented a picture quite different from that of the Protectorate. In 1955, just before independence, two opposite camps could have been distinguished. On the one hand, that of the Protectorate with its administrations, the European community, and the traditionalist families of the Ulema, the heads of the religious brotherhoods. On the other hand, there existed the nationalist camp of the political parties, the resistance movement, and the trade unions. And dominating this scene, there stood the king, who since his exile had become for many Moroccans a symbol of the aspirations towards independence, towards social and political reforms. New social forces, however, were soon to demand attention. Hundreds of thousands of minor civil servants, soldiers, tradesmen, members of the liberal professions, and trade unions expressed their desire to play a more important part in the direction of the country's policies. The charter of the Union Nationale des Forces Populaires, UNFP, gives clear indications of this new state of mind, which was to cause the division of the Istiklal. It urges a socialist internal policy founded on agrarian reform, which it considers to be a necessary condition for raising the living standards of the peasant masses, and on the nationalization of vital sections of the economic life. In its external policy, the party advocates the support of the Algerian nationalists and the building up of a unified Maghreb within the framework of the Arab Brotherhood and African solidarity, as well as a foreign policy founded on the principles of self-determination, free cooperation, solidarity with those people who are still struggling for freedom, and the strengthening of international peace. If the charter does not mention Arab unity, preferring the unbreakable bonds between the sections of the Arab nation, its authors proclaim support for the movement towards African liberation and for the setting up of a progressive, prosperous African Union. Political forces in Morocco have thus undergone an important development. To the mainly nationalist character which they had during the Protectorate, a social content has now been added, a new element that serves to distinguish the various Moroccan parties from one another. Differences appear too in the attitudes of the parties to general foreign policy and even to Algeria. On the burning issue of Mauritania, which the Moroccans call upon to unite with the mother country, shades of opinion separate the various parties. Whilst the palace and the Istiklal simply ignore the existence of Mauritania, considering it an artificial puppet state, the leaders of the UNFP, as far back as 1959, called for the right of Mauritania to self-determination. In December 1959, Mehdi bin Barka, Secretary General of the party, declared, quote, "The people of Mauritania, like the rest of the African people, aspire to independence, and our duty is laid down by the total solidarity which binds us to all liberation movements. The union of Mauritania with Morocco is a problem which depends primarily upon the will of Mauritania. Moreover, this is far exceeded by the movement of the whole of Africa towards union and general cooperation with friendly non-African states." End quote. Algeria also divides the parties. While the palace and the bulk of Moroccan parties are in agreement with the general cause of Algerian nationalism, they react differently to the leftward drift of the GPRA. The palace and the Istiklal feared the possible formation of a socialist Algeria, which they would be reluctant to see in the midst of a great Arab Maghreb. They received with concern the replacement of Ferhat Abbas by Ben Khedda as head of the Algerian rebellion. Will this evolution of the Algerian nationalist movement drive Morocco to seek closer relations with Tunisia? Certainly. The two countries have not always been such great friends. Just after independence, a certain rivalry arose for the leadership of the Maghreb, which both Tunis and Rabat claimed equally. But this rivalry was forced into the background by the Algerian drama. The divergent views of the two capitals also appeared in October 1958, when the Tunisians, having joined the Arab League, decided to boycott it and protest against Nasser, whom they accused of wanting to subordinate the League to his personal ends. The Moroccans refused to follow the Tunisian example and disapproved of the accusation against Egypt. The independence of Mauritania provided an even greater source of bitterness and conflict between the two countries, since Tunisia recognized the new state as soon as its independence was proclaimed. Alal el-Fassi excommunicated Bourguiba as a man who has stabbed Morocco in the back. In Tunisia, such erosions of the great Arab Maghreb were deplored, and a Tunisian minister, Mohamed Mazmoudi, wondered in June 1961 why this Maghreb, which we all thought was great and all wanted to see tolerant, has so quickly resolved itself into a bundle of bitterness and mistrust, why those comrades in arms who, by their own methods of struggle, by their clear integrity, by their direct style, could have restored Arab prestige, have allowed schism to split their ranks. The solidarity with Algerian nationalism, common aspiration toward a great Arab Maghreb, have to date clearly appeared insufficient to bind the fates of the two North African Arab states closely together. Moreover, Morocco, more perhaps than Tunisia, faces the blasts of North African change. Many people wonder whether the Moroccan monarchy is not itself threatened. At the present time, no political party publicly contemplates anything more than the change of the absolute monarchy into a constitutional one. In April 1961, Boabid, a former Moroccan minister and a prominent leader of the UNFP, explained the state of the country after Mohammed V's death. Quote, Algeria will not escape severe social upsets. Politically and economically, she is set upon a revolutionary process which cannot be reversed. The Moroccans will therefore be very sensitive to what goes on in Algeria. We hope that Hassan II will decide to be a king arbiter and truly assess the reality of a political scene that is indeed disturbing. If he understands that his person is not involved and that only the future of the country concerns us, we are quite ready to collaborate with him, since, once more, we are not avowed anti-monarchists. Those monarchies concerned with their survival ought to resign themselves to accepting the rules of the game under a democratic system. In that event, there would be a new chance for a new start in Morocco. Certainly the feudal structure will not long withstand the probable establishment of a revolutionary power in Algeria, which will want to bring the country out of its underdeveloped state. End quote. Many Moroccans believe that the monarchy is facing its hour of trial. They say that while the throne was occupied by Mohammed V, there was no real danger of its being disturbed by internal opposition or Algerian influences. Now and for a long time to come, Morocco's Hassan II is expected to face a serious challenge from those who urge profound political and social reforms. He is himself endeavoring to solve, quickly and radically, serious economic and political problems, trying to enhance his prestige and consolidate his throne, for he realizes how heavy is the heritage his father left him, amidst the Maghreban and African turmoil. The great Arab Maghreb will not be achieved tomorrow. Ever since the birth of the Maghreban concept, growing difficulties have hampered its progress. The first serious breach in the projected union came over the independence of Mauritania, and this was followed by the Algero-Tunisian differences over the Sahara. The oil-rich desert was considered by the Algerian nationalists to be an integral, historically recognized part of Algeria, but Bourguiba himself wished it to become a sort of inland sea, of which Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, and Morocco would be joint owners and exploiters, with rights to its natural resources. The strong move to the left by the Algerian rebels is also bound to alter the Bourguibian vision of a moderate Maghreb favorable to the West. Certainly Ben Khedda and his friends have reservations about any hasty unification imposed from above. The example of the UAR, also united from above, is too close to be ignored by any Arab. Moreover, it remains true that the Maghreb is composed of different states, each with a different social and political regime. A leader of the FLN stated the case in 1961. The Algerian views on a Maghreban union are still tentative and must take into account the differences that already exist on the subject amongst the three North African countries. The idea itself is old. We have always believed that conditions for some form of North African union exist. True, the regimes in our respective countries are different, but geographically we are one nation, as we are in population, traditions, and culture. What we must emphasize more is the complementary potential of our economies. It is on that basis that we must prepare our reunification. I believe, however, that unity cannot be achieved in an authoritarian manner. We have just seen what happened in the United Arab Republic. Unity was imposed from above and was unable to survive. Conditions in some ways are more favorable in the Maghreb than in the UAR. I do not think it need be a matter of generations before we reunite. We just have to educate public opinion through our political organizations. If our respective political leaderships are able to translate this desire for unity into a real re-education of our students and working people, then it need be a matter of only a few years." End quote. More fundamental differences than the issue of Saharan ownership or divergent attitudes towards the West, however, divide the Muslim leaders of North Africa. There is also the question of personal power, which the Algerian rebels manifestly reject. Some Western politicians, indeed, have reproached them for not having their Bourguiba or their Mohammed V. Others hoped that Ferhat Abbas would fit the role. Certainly, from the very beginning of their insurrection, the Algerian Muslims have distinguished themselves by the absence of any boss, preferring to maintain what they call a collective leadership. Once again, here is what a leader of the FLN says, quote, "At the outset, we ruled out any idea of personal power, and we did so well before the revolution. I said at the outset, for we had learnt to distrust personal power and authority. We believe that collective leadership and stability are perfectly compatible. We are told that in an underdeveloped country a boss is indispensable in order to achieve stability. We believe, however, that even in an underdeveloped country, collective leadership and stability go together." End quote. Already the idea of a radical and neutralist Great Arab Maghreb is finding support in Morocco and Tunisia, as well as among an influential and now dominant wing of the Algerian nationalists. The concept of Great Arab Maghreb as a source of profound social and political changes, instead of merely an aspiration to unity from above, may well become one day a pivotal feature of North African politics. End chapter. Chapter 11. A New Era. Arab nationalism as an inspiration of Arab people towards independence has been no stranger a dynamic than that which was made the black nations, or indeed any other nations, strive to achieve their sovereignty. Arab nationalism has been a 20th century phenomenon. During the past few decades, however, it has undergone a profound evolution, and since the days of Lawrence of Arabia or Hussein ibn Ali, king of Hijaz, has achieved a growing international importance. First, Arab nationalism has expanded beyond its Middle Eastern limits, and nowadays embraces the whole of Arab or white North Africa. Secondly, with the more important role which Africa and Asia have assumed during the last 15 years, the Arab countries, independent at last, have exercised an ever greater influence on the international scene. And the leadership of the pan-Arab movement has undergone a considerable evolution as well, passing from one social stratum to another. At its outset, it lay in the hands of monarchs and tribal chiefs, who in their dreams of restoring a vast historical empire compromised in varying degrees with the colonial powers. When Hussein ibn Ali proclaimed himself king of Hijaz in 1916, he aimed at creating, with Britain's help, an empire that would stretch from Arabia to the heart of Asia Minor. In time, however, such rulers were assailed by a new wave of Arab nationalism, by those who attacked them for having sided with the colonial powers, and having failed as a result to achieve or complete their country's independence. The era of feudal pan-Arabism was followed by that of bourgeois Arab nationalism. It was the new era of Arab entrepreneurs, industrialists, and tradesmen, whose economic, cultural, and political development was hindered by foreign colonization. The era of Arab civil servants, intellectuals, or army officers, all of whom felt bitterly the limitations of their underdeveloped countries and craved for political, cultural, and economic Lebensraum. Most of the military revolutions which took place in the Arab world after the Second World War were responses to the demands of this discontented middle class, a class to which the rebellious army officers themselves belonged. For many Arabs, this bourgeois era is identified with one country, Egypt, and one man, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser, they say, has been primarily responsible for promoting the renaissance of Arab nationalism during the last 10 years, and himself initiated the first real modern experiment in Arab unity, unsuccessful though it proved. For Nasser's admirers, this era has coincided with an unprecedented strengthening of the Arab world's international position, with the active part played by Arab nationalists in the development and consolidation of neutralism in Africa, with the granting of wide-scale help and encouragement to Arabs who had not yet achieved their independence. His detractors assert, on the contrary, that Nasser has merely used Arab nationalism to satisfy his personal ambitions, or those of his own social group in Egypt itself. They maintain that his activity in Africa and in the Arab countries has displayed this personal and class colonialism. They produce as proof of their view the unhappy experiment of the United Arab Republic, the ideas contained in the philosophy of the revolution, the use of Islam for political purposes. One conclusion seems certain. The bourgeois era of Arab nationalism, whatever its historical achievements or shortcomings may be, has not been much more successful than the era which preceded it in fulfilling that age-old dream of the Arabs, to unite. Will the present leadership of Arab nationalism therefore fall in its turn to a more radical group? In the Maghreb and many Arab countries of the Middle East, various political leaders consider that Arab nationalism should from now on become a means for social change, a weapon against what they call feudal privileges. Gamal Abdel Nasser himself seems aware of this evolution and has publicly stated that unity should no longer be sought between socialist Arab countries and others dominated by reaction. He is clearly in the process of turning his struggle for Arab unity into a crusade against reaction. He seems anxious to lead the radical transformation of Arab nationalism, its evolution from the bourgeois to the popular era. But he is not alone in his wish. A new Arab center of attraction will appear in the Maghreb with the independence of Algeria, likely to be the most developed country in Arab Africa after Egypt. And this center may well rival the call of Egypt's Arab nationalists. Algeria's independence must affect the history of Arab nationalism itself. But whatever the evolution of Arab nationalism may be, the relationship between the Arab and Negro states of Africa seems bound to develop. Already the rigid border between white and black Africa is no longer real. A number of countries from both sides have even contemplated some form of confederation. The militant countries of the Casablanca bloc have established a joint military high command and several consultative committees and agreed on the eventual elimination of tariffs. With a growing number of sovereign African states, the links between the Arab and the black peoples steadily increase. Nationalist leaders from European-dominated states are given assistance and encouragement by Arab countries. In Cairo, in Tunis, Rabat, or Tripoli, they are granted asylum, facilities, and funds. And they receive support from the Arab delegates to the various international organizations. But how far can this relationship develop? In several parts of Africa, the leaders of the newly born states feel real mistrust of pan-Arab intentions. Race consciousness is not restricted merely to one side of the Sahara. The last few years have shown that, however strong the desire for larger regroupings in Africa and the Arab world may be, it is faced with definite obstacles. The breakup of the Mali Confederation in 1960 and the failure of the United Arab Republic in September of the following year were two examples of too hastily constructed a political unity. The union of white and black Africa may not be for tomorrow, but it would be a bold prophet who would deny the possibilities of continental unity altogether. There is a day after tomorrow.